Hey, what's going on? My name is Bim, and I think Guardians of the Galaxy is almost a masterpiece. It's not quite there, but it's really good. I think no other game in recent memory has had more people on the fence than Guardians of the Galaxy. In every Facebook group that I see, or every Twitter thread that I follow, even on Reddit about Guardians, there will always be people asking, is it good? How does it compare to the Avengers? Things like that. And I think that kind of tentativeness, despite the glowing critical reviews Guardians has received from a lot of the outlets, is because of its association with the Avengers. They're both from the same publisher, and they're both superhero teams. And because the Avengers is kind of like a slow motion train wreck, people are going to be wary. But thankfully, even though from the start, from the get-go, the Avengers has put Guardians at a disadvantage. You can't keep a good game down. If it's a good game, people are going to talk and people are going to take notice. So I think Guardians of the Galaxy is one of the best, most narratively satisfying games this year. As someone who grew up reading comics, I can confidently say that the most enjoyable part of comic book reading isn't really the big action sequences or the weird storylines. It's really more about the characters and giving credit where credit is due. I know a lot of people, a lot of comic book fans don't really like James Gunn's take on the Guardians. But before Gunn got his hands on Star-Lord was essentially Space Captain America with guns and daddy issues. But Gunn was able to take the character of Peter Quill and make him stand out among the unique and colorful characters of Marvel. And what Eidos Montreal did was they took Gunn's blueprint of Star-Lord and expanded upon it. And, they fleshed him out, they gave him a bit more heart, a bit more likability. The game's take on Peter Quill holds up. I feel like he still acts as the glue to the whole team. And that's kind of seen in both the narrative and the gameplay execution. Rocket is still pretty much the same movie Rocket, except that you will feel for him more. You will understand his motivations and backstory a little bit more. This is true for Gamora and Drax as well, but I think the game really redeemed Drax. Drax, from the movies, is more or less the comic relief, but in the game, he's a pivotal part of the team. He has a lot more heart. He's a lot more interesting. He's a lot deeper. He's still funny. He still has that, deadpan humor, but he's now no longer just comic relief. The way the game tells the story is linear. It plays out from chapter to chapter. It's almost sort of like a Sony first-party exclusive, a single-player exclusive. It's something like that. The linearity does lend itself to some tight storytelling. Everything matters, so story chapters that you think are filler actually matter in the long run. And along with a satisfying story, the game's presentation is also top-notch. And to be able to tell a story this complex and emotionally charged effectively, you need good facial animations. And thankfully, Guardians has some of the best facial animations in gaming. I think it's on par with The Last of Us 2. It's a little more cartoony than The Last of Us 2, but I would say if the goal is to be able to convey emotion with just the face without uttering a single line, then it does the job very well. And as you go on this epic quest, you are thrust into locations. Some are iconic, some a little less so. Some set pieces that are all visually impressive. They all look visually unique. Like every location you visit has its own kind of personality, and that keeps the game from getting stale, And every location is designed with such creativity and skill, making for some really breathtaking vistas. It's pure eye candy, I swear. And to help preserve these memories, there is photo mode. It's not the most advanced photo mode that I've used, and I think photo mode is something that all games should have moving forward. But I like that it brings back comic book frames like they did in Spider-Man, so you could have comic books of Rocket Raccoon or Star-Lord, or like a pin-up poster, things like that, and it's great. Guardians of the Galaxy's gameplay does some things well and some things not as well. So even though you're given limited paths and areas to explore, it's still very rewarding to check every nook and cranny of the space you're given. So these hidden paths are usually mini puzzles where you could use Star-Lord's entire kit to just traverse the map, and you use some skills of the Guardians to get you in places you couldn't otherwise get to. And While the puzzles are pretty simple, they're still pretty satisfying, and the rewards you get are legitimately exciting to find. At the very lowest tier, you would say, you get crafting materials, which is necessary to power up Star-Lord, but not very exciting. You also find these items that unlock special conversations, like I mentioned earlier, and these are really nice to find. At the very tip top of the tier list of the things you could find in the game are skins, and they are free. Even the MCU skins that the Marvel's Avengers game is charging $14 for are free in Guardians of the Galaxy. Super free. You just have to find them. And now we come to the most glaring weakness of Guardians of the Galaxy, and it's the combat. The combat isn't terrible, it's not super bad, but it has mechanics that kind of hold it back. First of all, you only really get to use Star-Lord, which in and of itself isn't bad, right? But he only deals very, very, very tiny amounts of damage. It's like he brought Nerf guns to a space laser fight. And this is an intentional design choice. He was made weak so that he has to rely on the other Guardians to do the damage for him. And that kind of fulfills his leadership role in a gameplay perspective. And every Guardian has their own specialization. Gamora deals the most single target damage, Drax deals the most stagger damage, Groot has the best crowd control, and Rocket deals the highest AoE damage. Now these things work on a cooldown, and in between calling the Guardians for help, you are left with Star-Lord pew 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 pewing enemies until the cooldowns are up. So it becomes a game of waiting for cooldowns to be up, and that's not very engaging and not very fun. And another divisive combat mechanic, some people like it, I personally am lukewarm about it. It's the huddle mechanic. So it's essentially a buff you could apply to your entire team, and it also works on a cooldown. So Star-Lord calls the entire team over, even though when they're knocked down they get back up, and what it does is resets all the cooldowns. It gives them health buff, damage buff, and kind of fills up the life of everybody. But whether you get a big buff or a minor buff depends on what you choose to respond to. What you choose to respond with to your team. So they'll tell you, what they're feeling in the moment, and you have to respond properly. And that's not the only time a licensed track also plays, which is pretty cool. Overall, I found this mechanic to be pretty good only as a get out of jail free card. Like when two of your characters are down, you press it and you kind of revive them instantly. But it does slow combat down dramatically. Like it grinds it to a halt. And that's not very fun, and I don't think this mechanic is very necessary. Like I only really used it intentionally a couple times. The other times that I used it, I just kind of hit it by accident. I don't know why that happened so easy. I hit it by accident multiple times. And as polished as this game looks, unfortunately, you will encounter bugs. I've had to restart the game multiple times. There was one time I got stuck in some invisible geometry. There was another time enemies spawned, but they didn't take any damage and didn't move, so I had to restart. And then there's this ledge that you do that ledge walking animation on, and it triggers right after you leave the ledge. It triggers that it sucks you back in, so you couldn't get across, and that kind of just sucks. Hopefully eventually these bugs get patched out, but as it stands, it's still kind of pretty buggy. I really enjoyed Guardians of the Galaxy, but it's not without its faults. Where it truly shines is the narrative, character-driven story beats. It's a linear game by design to allow a satisfying story to unfold, and that's kind of like the main source of enjoyment for me. It is also bright and imaginative and colorful and has amazing facial animation, which I feel is super important to convey, emotion of the characters. Exploration is limited, being given linear chunks of space to work with, but finding costumes and treasures that trigger character interactions is quite rewarding. Plus skins are great for free. Where it falls short really is the combat. The element guns should feel stronger than they do, But what this game really makes me hopeful for is a sequel. Because it has a very solid foundation. It just has to adjust a few things and it'll be fantastic. And if I were forced to give it a score, I would probably say it's a soft 8.5. I enjoyed it that much, maybe a solid 8. If it wasn't as buggy and the combat was a little more enjoyable, I would probably say it's a 9. Anyway, those are my thoughts about Guardians of the Galaxy. I hope you found it informative, or at least entertaining, and I will catch you guys in the next one.
Team Rocket's up first.
I still do not understand why I must remain on board with the assassin.
Oh, because you're part of Green Team.
You assigned me to the team before you named it. My skin is not green. It's teal. Teal?